Mhm. Hello, Meadowlands YMCA. Great to connect with you. This is Carmen Bonilla. I am a job search coach and leadership development facilitator, and it pleases me to bring you this program about resume, networking, and interviewing. Thanks to the Meadowlands YMCA. I hope that this program will be of much benefit to you for a long time. And so, to introduce myself, as I said, I am a job search coach and leadership development facilitator. In the past, I was a professor for Rutgers Business School. I actually taught a course on job search skills to undergraduate business students of over 4 years. I estimate that in my career, I have coached over 400 job seekers and impacted over 3,000 job seekers. That includes the many job seekers whose resume I have read, whom I have mock interviewed, etc. In addition to this work, I bring 20 plus years of professional experience that I have had across the insurance industries, consulting. I've also been an entrepreneur and taught in higher education. I have also had diverse functions, including I have been a team leader, I have provided client service, I have done financial modeling, project management, I have taught, I have run learning and development, and sales, to mention some. And so I mentioned that to say that I leverage all that background in order to help my coachees from many different lines of work in conducting successful job searches. And so, in order to get the most out of this program, I encourage you to use the insights sheet on your participant workbook. It's a second page you are going to see there, and it looks just like this, what I'm showing on the screen. And so here you have space to summarize what are three things that you learned from this class that you would like to practice and apply in your job search. If you are like me and you like to take even more notes, feel free to do that because it's definitely been shown that there is benefit in writing down things, right? They say that we forget so many things of what we hear, but what we write down, it's as though we are telling the body, hey, body, I am spending some calories writing this down. This means that this is important to me. Help me remember this and learn it. The second thing that you see here is two boxes, and those two boxes are there encouraging you to write down the questions that you have as we complete our conversation here. For sure, covering these three topics in this class, we are not going to cover everything, right? And so I hope that questions will come up, that your intellectual curiosity will be piqued, and you will have questions that you want to continue to explore. So write those in those two boxes. And finally, there's one box here at the bottom and the encouragement for you to identify at least one next step action item that you would like to take in order to apply this learning. And so as adult learners, learning by doing is the most powerful way that we have of learning. So I really encourage you to write down at least one action item, and I will hope I hope that you will have more than one thing that you want to apply to your job search. And so, we're talking job search here. We're talking resume, networking, and interviewing. And I want to start by giving you the big picture. This is a process that I have defined um, for the job search, and I start with here from the bottom left hand side. I believe that in the job search, it is important to engage in some self-awareness exercises to know yourself, to choose wisely. What are the types of jobs that you are going to go after? What are jobs that are good fits for you? What are jobs about which you feel confident? The second thing that you can do to focus your job search is to generate a list of companies that are of interest to you. Number three, it's always good and necessary to research those companies so that you come up to talk with those companies and interact with them, knowing something about them. Number four, now that you have done that research, you have probably identified some jobs of interest. Now we prepare your marketing materials. That includes your resume, your LinkedIn profile. And number five, it's important and it will give you an edge to develop contacts at those organizations. So this is number five is where networking comes in. Once you have built some relationship, then number six, submit your application. You will be invited to interview number seven, and the goal is to receive job offers and to choose among those offers. And so let's get us started with the topic number one that we have on agenda for today. Creating an effective resume. And so, what is an effective resume? An effective resume is a resume that gets you invitations to interview. Okay, that is the next step that we want to achieve with a resume. It's to get those invitations to interview. And I need to say something about this picture that I am showing here on the screen. This document here, it shows resume, the word resume in big letters. And let me clarify, your resume should never have the word resume on it, okay? So we do not give a title to our resume by the word resume. We do not do that, okay? I just want to be clear. All right. So why is it important to have a solid resume? Well, the resume is the document that you provide to potential employers to introduce yourself. You want to give those potential employers good reasons so that they will be interested in you, they will be curious, they will have a good feeling about you and be motivated to reach out to you and invite you for an interview. And so think about it. You are introducing yourself. The people who will interview you, they could become your next boss, your next co-workers. So you want to create a good first impression a solid first impression. From here, starting with your resume, you start positioning yourself. You start telling that potential employer who you are, how dedicated are you to quality work, what are your credentials? You start positioning yourself from the time that you are writing your resume, that you submit it in for them to take a look at. You are positioning yourself all throughout for how much money you want to make, for how many promotion opportunities you want to have in future years, so on and so forth. So, for sure, I encourage you to make an effort and do your best to make the best first impression possible. Okay. And so here I had a few questions that I wanted to ask you, and I'm going to look them up in a separate document that I had. You can follow me with your participant workbook. Let me actually get that here on the screen. Okay, we're right here on page number 3, fill in the blanks. And so there's always been lots of discussion about how long or short your resume should be. Well, let me make a caveat. So now in here in number 1, recruiters prefer resumes that are 1 page long. And if you want, add the note that this applies to candidates with less than 10 years of experience. Okay? If you have more than 10 years of experience, is the second fill in the blank here. It is acceptable for your resume to be 2 pages long. And so the business press tells us, number 3, that recruiters usually take up very, very short time scanning your resume. Some articles that I have seen in recent years have estimated only 7 seconds. And the way that I explain that, this is my theory about this. I believe that this is so because recruiters get very agile. They get a level of expertise in looking at resumes. And so they are able to determine just within a few seconds whether they want to invite you in for an interview or not. And so I'm going to discuss with you some techniques about how to address this on your resume. And so I'm going to skip number 4 here. Number 5, the main objective of a resume is to get you an invitation to interview. That is the objective and the test of a resume. And so I want to go back to the slideshow, and I want to make this next case to you that resume writing is an iterative process. It's so interesting, resume writing. In my opinion, it's one of those very few documents that really we keep coming back to through the years, making it better, adding more content, um, modifying it, reviewing it, updating it. And so here on the screen, I am showing you a list of resumes that I wrote and versions that I created, most of this in just the year 2014. And you can see I do keep, and this is something that makes some people curious, I do keep my resume in Excel. I like that Excel has, the little cells. And so with using the cells, I make sure that my information is aligned. And I also converted to PDF version. So that's why I have so many versions in just 2014. And so something that I work with my coaches and that I believe it's very important when we are creating a resume is to make sure that our bullet points that they are really focused on our achievements. This is a big mistake that some inexperienced job seekers make, and it is that they focus on explaining what they did, what was the process of the work that they did. And candidly, a reader of your resume, they don't care about that much. What they are most interested in is what were your achievements? What were your results? And so, for example, right, thinking about a cash register job, well, the cash register job, it's pretty standard, right? Just about every cash register goes through the same motions. They do the same things. But where the people doing those jobs, where they differentiate themselves, is their productivity, right? Their quality and accuracy, their customer service, their ability to catch management's attention and get a promotion. So I encourage you to always think of your resume as your unique story. And so, how do you make your resume unique to you? Creating achievement bullet points is one of those ways. Let's take a look. An important tool in creating these achievement bullet points is to quantify the impact that you had, the operation that you led. Our intention here is to communicate what is your bandwidth, what is your capacity, how much can you take on? And so, for example, if you worked for a small company, like a mom and pop shop, for example, or something bigger than that, but still small, and a company that is not a household name, I would recommend, for example, including a parenthesis next to the name of the company to mention what was that company's revenue, for example. How many stores did it have? When it comes to you and your achievements, talk about what was the volume of transactions that you were able to handle. For example, When I was going to college, I was a full-time student and I took a part-time job. And back in the day, I'll uh, I had a very fun job at Blockbuster Video. So at Blockbuster, I stood out to my store managers, and they liked my work as a cash register. And so on my resume back in the day, I would provide an estimate that, in an 8-hour shift, when I was at the cash register, I usually processed about $3,600 in transactions or $2,400 in transactions, however much it was, right? For example, if you deal with inventory, you can provide what was the value of that inventory that you were responsible for. If you closed deals, what was the value of that? Did you manage budgets? If yes, how big? What was the dollar amount? If you led people, how many employees did you lead? It's also interesting to your resume reader to read about what were the levels of those employees that you led. Were they direct reports? Were they people managers themselves? How many teams did you lead? Departments? If you are in marketing, how many followers did you earn for social media accounts? How many new accounts did you win if you were in sales, for example? If you were in customer service or account management, for example, what was your percentage of repeat customers? What was your percentage of retained business, of business that renewed year over year, right? So these are all examples about how you can quantify. And this makes your resume story very much your own. I would like to share a caveat at this point, because see, as I am going through this content, um, I want to acknowledge that job searching is an art and it is not a science. And so, as many people as you ask for an opinion, you are going to get different opinions. Okay. In this program, I am going to share with you from my own observations. What I have seen has worked for many coachees that I have helped land their next opportunity. Okay, so let's continue with some additional tips. Also, this can also be helpful to you as you are creating achievement bullet points. And it is to write about how did you compare with others in a similar role? Because the truth is, in the business world, we are competing with others, right? And so, how did we stand out? What awards did we win? Out of how many competitors for those awards, right? By how much did you increase sales or did you reduce costs? How many projects did you participate in or lead? And so these are other ways to talk about achievement points, bullet points. When you get a promotion and you talk about your promotion, how many people did compete with you for that promotion? And you can mention that. Right? And so let's go to the workbook and we're going to do an exercise about achievement bullet points here on page 4. So in this exercise, what I am asking you to do is to rewrite these bullet points that you have here. Our intention, what we desire to do, is to make them more of an achievement bullet point. And so here are multiple examples that I actually grabbed from actual resumes: accounting, retail experience, entrepreneurship, marketing, management. These are some examples. So you can go to the section that appeals the most to you. Hopefully one of them will. And so let me give you an example, right? What we are wanting to do here is to apply the knowledge that I just explained to you in the past 2 slides. So let me give you one example here. This bullet point here. It's from an accounting resume. And so this job seeker said that they analyzed all the culinary invoices, they developed spreadsheets, and recorded payments. Okay, so the question becomes, how can we make this bullet point stronger? How can we make this a better achievement bullet point? Well, here are some suggestions. The first thing that I notice about this bullet point is that there are 3 phrases contained within this bullet point. In the first part, it says, analyzed all culinary invoices. Well, here's a suggestion. Analyzed all culinary invoices? I do not like the use of the word all on a resume. Why? Because see, your reader has no idea what was the quantity of culinary invoices that you were handling. What is all invoices? No idea. Go figure, right? And so let's do our reader and ourselves a favor and let's try to quantify that. So how many culinary invoices are we talking about? Is it 30 monthly on a monthly basis, etc.? Is it 1,000, right? However many they were, you can make an estimate. And so here with that, you start noticing, right, and reflecting on the value of actually quantifying, keeping records of what you do, right, of the value that you bring. There may be situations when you may need to ask a manager, so how much was my volume? How much was my productivity? I certainly did that when I estimated how many transactions I processed at Blockbuster Video. Okay. Second thing in this analysis. So the second phrase in this bullet point says developed spreadsheets. Okay. So what does that mean? What type of spreadsheets were there? What were they used for? Here we can provide more detail. How did they contribute to the process? How did they add value? For example, from my career, there was a time in which I developed a report that was a significant report with thousands and thousands of lines on an Excel spreadsheet. And the use for that report was to do a evaluation to obtain some numbers that contributed to the sale of a business division. So I suggest, right, talking about, okay, so what was the spreadsheet for? Did it help with a process? Did it automate it? Did it save time, etc.? Okay. And recorded payments is the third part, the third phrase within this bullet point. Recorded payments, well, we could mention like, how much in payments, right? On a monthly basis, for example. And so the purpose, again, like I said before, is to provide our reader a sense of what is our capacity, our bandwidth, what is the type of place where we have worked, what is the bandwidth for what we have done. Okay. All right. So if you want, pause here and take a few minutes to do this exercise and practice rewriting these bullet points into ways that they are stronger and more effective achievement bullet points. If you want, pause the recording here. Okay. So now I want to take you to content in the workbook about best practices concerning your writing your cover letter and resume. So let's go there. Okay, so we go to page 6 of your participant workbook. And here on this checklist, I have at the top cover letter best practices. And so these are the best practices that I suggest when you're writing a cover letter. Include the name of the role that you are applying for. For larger companies, they usually have a job number, so include that as well. In your cover letter, you do not want to tell your entire career story. Instead, you want to focus on why do you want to work for the company that you are writing to? What qualities and experience do you possess that makes you an ideal candidate? I recommend the use of bullet points to organize your information. And I have seen some cover letters that are thick blocks of paragraph information. I do not support that. Using bullet points, it helps your reader scan your cover letter. That's what they are going to do after all. and it can help you to to be more clear about what is the message that you are trying to communicate to them. How are you pitching yourself? And then in the final paragraph, ask the reader to take action and contact you to schedule an interview. Let's take a look at what are some best practices for your resume. And so you want your resume to include keywords that are relevant to the job you are searching for. Okay. Um, some coaches have asked me, Carmen, do I need to have a resume, a different customized resume for each one of the jobs that I apply to? Well, this is my opinion and recommendation. I believe that that is too much work. My recommendation is let's create a resume that has enough keywords that appear on the job postings that you are applying for. And that way, that resume will be helpful to you for many jobs that you want to apply for. Customizing a resume for each job that you apply to, it's a lot of work. And sometimes some say that executives are expected to do that in their job search. I give this advice even to executives. I believe that it is possible to include enough keywords in one version that you can make it highly relevant to many jobs. And so we want to focus on the resume, on talking about what are the skills, what is the experience that you acquired in the past that positions you well for the job you are searching. In particular, um, if you are looking for a job in a new field or a new type of role that you have not done in the past, this refers to transferable skills, right? The skills, that is the definition of transferable skills, skills that you acquired in the past that you can leverage in that future job you want. And so, something that I recommend and that I work with my coachees is in making sure that we prioritize the achievement bullet points under each job experience. Because remember, right, what I was telling you a little while ago, that the business press tells us that apparently recruiters only scan our resumes for about 7 seconds. Well, if that is true, then let's prioritize and let's put at the top under each job experience what our proudest achievements were. Okay? Don't don't expect the person reading your resume to search and look for the detail. What is your proudest achievement? Let's do their job easier. And because, right, it comes with benefits for ourselves too. And so articulate your unique accomplishments in each one of your jobs, quantify them, include any volunteer experience, especially if it is relevant to the job you are applying to. In some cases, I have recommended to my coachees, you know what? It may not be necessary to include volunteer experience. Sometimes, some things that I will advise job seekers not to include may have to do, for example, with volunteer experience at the particular church that they attend. um, or that in any way describes your religious affiliation. That is a category that is protected by law. And so I sort of prefer to keep those off the resume and keep your privacy of what your religious affiliation is. And so I also encourage you to provide a full picture of your past work experience. I have worked with a number of job seekers that I found they had left out experience from their resumes, and in particular, that could be relevant. It was still experience that was pretty recent, so it should be received well by your audience. And so do not leave out experience that can help you show your expertise or show your number of years of experience. And so here I mentioned to you your the resume, describing in your resume in parentheses, providing information about small employers that you have had in the past. At the end of the day, it is important that your resume be easy to understand, that it employs clear language. And sometimes this happens with, we have so many industries, right? That develop their own lingo, their own acronyms. And so, what I like to remind my coachees is that remember that before a hiring manager sees your resume, most likely an HR, a human resource person, sees your resume. And that HR person, he or she may not be that familiar with the acronyms, the technical acronyms to do your job. And so it's always important to spell out your acronyms, tell your reader exactly what does that acronym mean. And try to keep it as clear as possible so that the HR person will understand. By the same token, right, there are HR persons who are experts on the business. So I don't want to take, right, any expertise away from those who have it. We just, we're making a case for clear language that anybody will be able to understand. And so my suggestion is to have to show all verbs on your resume in past tense. By the way, you write your resume in third person. You talk about yourself as he or she. For example, brings focused experience in, right? It is uncommon to use the first person. I build teams. We don't usually write resumes in first person. And so it's important to make sure that you have caught any typos and fix them before you submit your resume. Make sure that you have consistent formatting For those with less years of experience, keep it one page. And the bottom line test is this resume increasing your chances of being called to interview? Okay. All right. Second topic. Second topic of networking. And so networking is an interesting topic. And one of the things that stand out for me about it is that job seekers, they bring their own thoughts and opinions about networking and how they feel about it. Personally, I love networking. And in fact, for some time, when people would ask me what was the thing that I had enjoyed the most when I went to school for my master's degree, I would say, candidly, the networking for job search. And so I encourage you to bring a positive attitude to it, to bring an open mind to it, and to be to be open to a new experience, networking, to bring curiosity, right, for meeting the people that you will meet, and of course, um affirm yourself, right? You can do this. You can do this. Bring that self confidence. And so you may have heard that in the job search field, it is often said that most of the jobs, 70-80% of the jobs, they are never advertised. You can only learn about them through word of mouth. And that's how they are often filled. And so that gives us a great reason, right, to network, because it will provide us with more information about jobs that are available. You can also, when you're learning something, right, you can shorten your learning curve by learning from somebody else's experience. if you um if you identify people that can be a sounding board to you and give you advice, then you can end up improving your work product by having that people who help you. You can also increase your visibility through networking. Something that I have observed through the years, networkers, when you network with a group of people repeatedly over time, you start sort of like identifying, right, yourselves. You start seeing, right, the faces repeatedly at different events. You increase your visibility, right? People know you because you're out there. You're putting yourself out there to be known, etc. And so you can also use networking to help others, not only to seek help. Networking, the positive thing about all this is that you can practice it and you can get better the more that you practice. I want to invite you to think about networking as a process. So you prepare and you execute. And, making your networking very intentional, it's a very interesting idea. You can actually set a vision for what it is that you want to achieve through your networking. You can identify targets. You can research those targets. And then in the execution, you show up in person or online. You build trust and rapport. You present yourself and engage with others. And don't leave it there. It is very important to follow up and continue building relationship. Otherwise, if you leave it here, you would essentially not reap the benefits of your networking. And so I share this grid with you in your participant workbook. This is a grid that I found on a UK website some years ago, and unfortunately, it wasn't there the last time that I went looking for it. But so here, I like a lot the thought process that it guides you through. It guides you to setting a goal for your networking, to think about what will be your strategies, um, to document who do you know already, and what success criteria will you set up for your networking? This criteria is the answer to the question, well, how do you know if you are being successful at networking? And then to identify current and future opportunities for networking. So you can identify places where you meet with people, where you get with their, and then you can identify people that you want to get to know, and think about, where could you connect with them? How to stay in touch, how to meet them, perhaps who can provide an introduction, etc. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Okay. And so for networking, you need to create a message, right? You need to have a message. What are you going to say? And here comes in the concept of the elevator pitch. And the elevator pitch is very helpful in having you prepare in advance what would you be saying, right? So that you don't get to that networking event and you don't know what you're going to say. And so, for example, thinking about the elevator pitch for your job search, my recommendation, candidly, is to have more of a conversation. My sense is that it may feel a little unnatural, right? If you are speaking for 30 seconds straight or 60 seconds straight, right? And so instead of doing that, what I recommend is break it down, right? Be aware of what is it that you want to communicate. So for example, I think some important things to communicate: your name, right? What is your name? What is your expertise or experience in? If you are talking to a recruiter, I find it very helpful to always mention, so what job are you interested in? And that way you immediately focus their attention. Also, be able to tell them what attracts you to their organization, right? This is a great way of showing you have done your homework, right? You have prepared for this quick conversation. This is one way in which you can make yourself more memorable, right? When you impress someone else by being prepared. You can also mention, this can be very valuable, is someone referring you? Do you know someone at the company? If you drop names, make sure that you have alerted that person that you would drop their name, or even ask them beforehand, would it be okay if I mention you to the recruiter or hiring manager? And be clear also in what is your ask. What are you asking for? Okay. For example, are you asking for status on your application, etc.? Okay. And some reminders. Oh, I wanted to mention real quick, these pointers are copied in your participant workbook. So you can go there and actually, yeah, let me encourage you to do that. You can go there and write your own elevator pitch. Okay. So I encourage you to take 2 minutes to write down your elevator pitch. And so some advanced some advanced techniques around your elevator pitch is that you can customize it, personalize it, right, to the person you are going to be speaking with. And so, yeah, I call that an advanced technique, right? So in that way, you talk to the person about what is most relevant to them, what is most interesting to them. Sometimes I get the sense that some job seekers, they go telling their story to employers. And what I challenge you and encourage you to do is to really choose things that are most interesting to them. You have, right? You have heard about how our attention spans, they have gotten shorter and shorter. And so you can make yourself more interesting and more memorable if you are able to speak more directly to what they are interested in about your background. Okay, so I encourage you to take a couple minutes to stop this video, pause this video, and go write down your elevator pitch. Pause the video and go write down your elevator pitch. And so now, some tips and reminders about what to do or how to deliver your elevator pitch. When you are delivering it, project positive energy, enthusiasm, smile. And here, this next one, in my opinion, this is like an advanced technique, right? If we can remember, how can we vary our vocal intonation while we are delivering that elevator pitch, right? That can make it more interesting and engaging to our audience. Also, be mindful of your body language, right? You want to project confidence with your body language. When you're talking about your accomplishments, prioritize the most important ones, the ones that are related to work, um, prioritize those first. And then if you want to mention any personal accomplishments, perhaps put that second. Expect objections, and you can overcome objections by answering them prior to the interviewer asking about them. For example, um, I recommend the use of a longer elevator pitch when you are answering the question, tell me about yourself, or walk me through your resume, which my interpretation is that both of those questions, they are asking the same thing. The tell me about yourself and the walk me through your resume. And so I'm going to give you some pointers in just a bit about that. Practice your elevator pitch. Practice is very helpful with your elevator pitch, with your interviewing skills. So definitely, if you can get a job search buddy or a job search coach, that's definitely something that I work with my coaches, that practice. Um, Develop a story and plan how to wrap up the conversation. For example, if you are at a career fair, right, and you have many employers that you want to go visit with, plan what will you say to wrap up your conversation. Okay. And so when you think about it, the elevator pitch, it can serve as a conversation starter. Other ways in which you could start a conversation could be talking about some recent news of the company. And for this, I highly recommend Twitter. Researching on Twitter what has been going on at the company. What have they tweeted about most recently? It's a great way of learning what are the most recent news. You can also ask questions about the personal experience of this person that you're speaking with. You can talk about a role of interest. What is the hiring process? What is the company culture? Very important conversations to have, etc. Okay. So I want to mention a couple other things that are in our participant workbook. So let's go there. Page 7 of your participant workbook, I provide a sample cover letter. Page 8, sorry. The networking plan that I showed you already is on page 9. Elevator pitch is here on page 10. And I give you some versions, some different ways in which you can go about. Mhm. And then there is informational interviewing. Informational interviewing, we could either think about it as a tool in networking or in interviewing, but mostly I think of it as a tool in networking. And the concept of an informational interview is a concept in which you are having a conversation with someone um, to learn about their experience, their career experience. And so, in order to have an informational interview, um, well, let me say this: when are informational interviews valuable for you? Well, in many different situations. For example, number one, if you are exploring a career that you have not done this job yet. Um, Informational interviewing can be helpful to learn more about someone's career, ask for advice, try and see by learning more about that career whether it might be a good fit for you, whether it might be a career where you would be happy. Okay. Another situation in which you can use informational interviewing is to learn more about a company, right? So many times we find, right, that companies, large companies, for example, they portray themselves in a particular way, but they are so large that they have so many different business divisions, departments. Your experience there could be totally different according to the department or business division that you work for or the manager that you work for. And so in those situations, you can check and see who do you know there, right? Who do you know there that would be willing to have a conversation with you and share from their experience, give you advice, dot, dot, dot. Okay. All right. And so notice here, right, a step by step that I provide on how can you go about conducting informational interviews. You start with identifying people with whom you would like to have a conversation. It could be people that went to your same school. It could be family, friends, or acquaintances, LinkedIn connections, entrepreneurs. So many options, right? Contact that person by email or phone call. Ask them for 30 minutes to find a day and a time, right, where you can speak for 30 minutes and prepare for that conversation. Something important about this process, and I learned this from my own personal experience. Sometimes when I reached out to people for informational interviews, they sometimes got interested in me. They got curious about me, and they started asking me questions. In effect, they started interviewing me. And so you need to be prepared for that. It could happen to you too. All right. And I'm going to show you a form in a little bit. And just like you would do with a regular employment interview, send a thank you note afterwards. Okay. And so here I share with you this list of questions, great list of questions. And so it's a long list. It's a long list, and you should not plan on asking all these questions. It would take a long time. What I recommend is that you choose the questions you want to ask beforehand. And notice that the form here, it has you thinking about what is your intention? What are your goals for this informational interview? So that you can tell, were you successful at the interview? All right. Did you get and did you communicate what you wanted to? Needless to say, informational interviews are a great way of introducing yourself, right? They are informal. There is no commitment from either side about job or interview or anything, right? They are a great way and of introducing yourself, and you should plan on doing that, on introducing yourself, on telling your story, essentially offering to answer, walk me through your resume, even if the question is not asked. Okay. I believe that anybody that you ask for an informational interview, I believe that their expectation is that they will get to know more about you. Okay. Okay. So let's go into the topic of interviewing. This is our third topic of the program. And and so let's get familiar with the vocabulary around interviewing and the sequence of interviews. So, you could start your process with an informational interview that we were just discussing. And then you can move to a screening phone interview that most times this happens with an HR person, a recruiter. Interviews can be formal or informal. By informal, I mean they can invite you to, say, have a lunch meeting and talk during lunch. This type of interviews, they are used to observe you, right? And see what are your behaviors in this type of situation where you may find yourself with a client, for example. Or they can be very formal at the office, suit and tie kind of thing. There can be second round interviews, third, fourth. I have heard some interviewees, gosh, be interviewed so many times. It's pretty surreal. There can be some final interviews or super day interviews. Super day interviews are interviews when the company perhaps arranges for a day for you to meet with four, five, six people. And so by the end of the day, everybody who needed to meet you, they met you, and they will get together and make an opinion of you, right? Make a decision. And so, types of interviews, there's the traditional interview. Um, we the questions are not new, are not that creative, right? It's just very, very traditional. There are behavioral types of questions. These you can identify them because they usually start with the words, tell me about a time when, and then they ask you to tell a story. These types of questions, they ask you to draw from your past experience. Do not answer these questions with a hypothesis or theory of how you would do something. You need to tell a story of how you actually solved a situation like that in the past. When you are interviewing for consulting jobs, you may get a case question or puzzles. These two are different, but they are popular in consulting interviews. And many times, more than the right answer, they are looking to listen to your thought process. How do you explain? How do you break down a problem, etc.? There can be a stress interview in which the interviewer may come in with high levels of emotion and maybe exerting pressure on you in some way to see how you react under stress. There are technical interviews in which they ask you for your technical knowledge, right? And this can happen in accounting, in finance, it can happen in engineering, they can happen in practically any profession. They are looking for your knowledge and expertise. A panel interview happens when it is three of them, two of them, or more interviewing you. So that's a panel. Or it could be that you are interviewing with other candidates, and that's a group interview. A situational interview is the type of interview in which they ask you to answer a hypothetical question. What would you do if this happened? Okay. And then finally, there is an interview called the bad cop, good cop. And here you usually have two interviewers. One of them shows a positive response to you, like positive, encouraging, nurturing. And the other interviewer comes in with like skeptical about you and not convinced. They may frown at you. And it's quite an interesting technique. Um, and so, right, it's another way of testing you. How do you respond, right? How do you respond in your behavior? And so, right, it's best to stay cool, calm and collected. All right. Okay, so I sort of addressed this. Okay. So some techniques that you can use to deal with the stress and fear that sometimes we experience around interviews is, for example, deep breathing. And I have a couple of techniques that I'm going to discuss with you that they are all about putting the body at ease. And so research, for example, has shown that taking 3 deep breaths that take at least 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, they can change your body chemistry. And so if you have arrived, right, give yourself enough time so that that doesn't add to your stress, right? You can do this very simple exercise of breathing 3 times. And another thing that can be helpful to you to sort of like let that nervous energy go is to actually change your body position. Change your body position. It also tends to help us to get into a new frame of mind. There have been some TED Talks that have discussed power postures for confidence, right? If you want to experience a bit more confidence going into the interview, um, there's a TED Talk speaker that recommends, well, go into the bathroom and do some of these postures that I'm showing you here on the screen. And so, right, these are ways of sending a message to your body, right? This is how I want to feel. Notice some distinctions of low power poses and high power poses, right? Ways in which you convey less or more power. I also, I also recommend be mindful, right, of your body language. You don't want to come across as a little too much with your poses. Okay. And so I want to mention to you a tool for preparing for your interview. Let's go to your participant workbook. So this tool is here on page 14 of your participant workbook. And this worksheet is meant to help you prepare for an interview. You can use it for both regular interviews and also for informational interviews. Like I said, for informational interviews, expect that it will totally happen that someone may actually start interviewing you. And that's a good thing, but you need to be prepared. And so this worksheet here, this is a framework that I prepared, that I came up with in through my own job searches, and has worked quite well for me. In doing research, right? So let's start with taking notes here. Okay, so what do I know about the company? Okay, and I write it down here. And then on LinkedIn, right, we can research about the interviewer. The company many times will tell you the name of the interviewer, and if they do not, ask them and tell them, if necessary, tell them that you would like to research the interviewer. And here, what do you know about the job? Give that job posting a really good read, a really good detailed read. And then, how are you a fit with what they are looking for in the person who will hold the job? And so your answer to this question can be a great source of information for your answer to walk me through your resume or tell me a bit about yourself, right? You can customize that answer with how you see that you are a fit for the job. And finally, you have space here to brainstorm questions that you will ask the interviewer. Okay. All right. And so let me also tell you about preparing for interview questions. Usually the very first question on your interview will be this one. Tell me about yourself. Walk me through your resume. And so here are some pointers about how to answer that question. Tell me about yourself does not at all require that you start with, well, I am originally from, and the name of your country or city. Okay. That is information that is protected by law, that it has to do with your ethnic background. So, since it's protected by law, do not share it. Right? You don't have to. And so, what you want to narrow down to in your answer is to, you could start with your education, with the degrees that you earned. You can mention that you earned them from University X and the name of your university, right? You could also start with a summary statement, and I'll give you an example of a summary statement I have used. So I have said in some interviews, over my 20-year career, I have uh, I have done many different functional jobs. For this interview, I believe that you are most interested in my experience in blank. And so I am going to share with you some highlights about that. Okay. And so I go and I tell them, I like to tell them and be concrete, say, so for example, in 2008, I started working for company X in a ABC role. In that role, I dot dot dot. I go on to speak about my achievement bullet points, right? Etc. And so here, see some other tips. I prefer, let me also say this. When I work with coachees and we practice interviewing, many times my coachees start with their latest job, their most recent job. And what I find difficult about that is that it is hard to show the progression, to show how you moved up from one role to the next when you are going backwards. So, for answering this question, my personal preference, and I find it easier when I am listening to a coachee answer this question, I find it easier when they start from the beginning. Now, if you have many years of experience, you don't need to tell the story of your 30 years of experience, right? In particular, for example, if you are now at a management or executive level, perhaps you choose to start your story in more detail when you first landed a manager or a director job. Okay. And so you can summarize your previous experience. For example, I was a software engineer for 10 years. And then in 2001, I was promoted to lead a software engineering team of 12 team members. I led that team to dot, dot, dot. Then in 2015, I was promoted to team lead number 2, right? And so I'm giving you that example to show how I find it easier to show progression when you start from the beginning. And so remember that similar to your resume, your listener is most interested in your achievements on the job. um talking about the process, the tasks that you completed on the job, that that may not be as valuable. Your achievements is what really makes it interesting, what really shows your bandwidth and what you're capable of. Remember to always focus on what is relevant to the job that you are applying to. Um, Again, it makes it more interesting for your listener, and it's a better use of time for both of you to understand what is the experience that you bring that is most relevant. Before, I talked about addressing objections, and employment gaps are usually one of those objections. Um, I think that since March 2020, recruiters understand that there has been a lot of turnover. There have been um, a lot of layoffs. So I believe that, employment gaps, recruiters are more understanding since March 2020 until now. If you have any other significant gaps of employment, for example, mothers who stayed at home, explain that and move gracefully. Use transition words to move the story. And so my personal recommendation, I believe that if you are an experienced professional, I believe that it's totally okay to speak up to 5 minutes telling your story, right? Remember, similar to what I was saying about your resume, remember that in your interview, you are introducing yourself, right? There's no better time to introduce yourself than now. don't don't wait to introduce yourself later, right? I was recently having a conversation with a coachee and saying, wouldn't it be weird if you are on the job for several months and 3 4 months in you are still introducing yourself because you didn't provide a thorough introduction at the beginning. Okay, so that's my encouragement on that. Okay. All right. So I think at the end of the day, practice is very important. It's very important. Speak it out loud, right? Sometimes we have this idea in our minds, we have some words floating around in our minds. And when we try to practice it, it's like, OMG, we start having trouble speaking the words, or we are taking too long, or we're not focusing on the right things. So, there's no substitute for practice. Something that I have observed in my coachees when we have had multiple practice opportunities, gosh, I see them. I see them improve so much from answers that did not, did not land that smoothly to answers that they get tighter, right? The coachee shows more confidence. It's a whole different experience. So now I encourage you to take a few minutes and practice. Time yourself and practice. How do you answer this question? Tell me about yourself, or walk me through your resume, which is the same question. All right. So I encourage you to pause the video here and take a few minutes to practice. How do you answer this question? Okay. So now I want to talk to you about behavioral questions. Behavioral questions became very popular in the 1990s. And the reason that employers like them so much is that they employers expect that you will answer with a story from the past that reveals how you behaved in the past, and they expect that you will probably behave in a similar way in the future. And so, like I said before, you can identify behavioral questions because they will usually start with the words, tell me about a time when. And like I said before, it's important for you to actually tell a story, okay? Be very concrete and specific about the story that you tell. And so here is a framework for how you can structure your thoughts in order to answer a behavioral question effectively. The framework is called STAR, and it's the acronym of these words that I have here on the screen: situation, task, action, result. And so what this framework is encouraging you to do is to use these four letters to structure the story you're going to tell. Start by telling what was the situation. And here, my recommendation is that you keep it very brief. Because at the end of the day, your listener, they are not that interested in the situation. What they want to hear more is your thought process, the actions that you took, and the results that you delivered. And so be very brief with situation. Use one or two sentences and move on to say, okay, and so based on that situation, I identified that we needed to ... In these questions, another tip is that, in our workplaces, most times we are working in teams, and it's very easy to fall into the trap of speaking a lot of we. And the truth is, at the end of the day, that they are evaluating you as an individual. They are not evaluating the team that you used to work for. Therefore, make sure that you are using the pronoun I and that you are highlighting the role that you played. Okay? And then, so situation and task in terms of managing your time, keep them brief. Okay? And now, as you transition to sharing which actions did you take and what results did you produce, spend most of your time there. Okay? And Something that you can do to help your listener follow you more easily is, and thus I went on to do the following. Number one, I did this. Number one, I did that. Number three, I asked for help with this. Number four, I delegated that. Number five, etc. Okay. And so you are answering in a very structured way. That type of answering can work very well. In particular, if you are interviewing with someone who has a consulting background, for example, right? These professionals are well known for being pretty structured. Like a project manager too would also appreciate some structure like that. And the results of those actions that we took were that dot, dot, dot. Okay. All right. And so I've been sharing a lot of information. I hope that this is helpful. And I'm so sorry we didn't get to talk live about these items. Hmm. But I definitely wish that all of this information is of a value to you. All right. So you may be asking yourself, gosh, so how do I prepare for behavioral questions? And here is an idea. When you read a job posting, I'm going to make the case to you to read it in deep detail. And so, for example, I have highlighted here, as you see, in blue, I have highlighted keywords, words that are important for this accounting coordinator job. And in red, I highlighted job activities, verbs that I found, or activities that I found mentioned. And so, tell me about a time when my sense is that they can ask you, here are some examples of questions that they could ask you. Tell me about a time when you analyzed ledger accounts and reconciled. Or that question could also be, tell me about your experience analyzing ledger accounts and reconciliations and performing reconciliations. Tell me about a time when you planned and developed a process. Tell me about a time when you collaborated and communicated with internal and external resources. Tell me about a time when you executed multiple projects concurrently. So, those are some examples that come to mind. You could do something similar in your preparation, and based on the job posting, you could prepare some questions that could come up in your interview. We never know, right? We never know. And so many times when we go into an interview, the company has somewhat changed their mind. They are looking for something else, or they are emphasizing something that it's not clearly apparent in the job posting. But we do the best we can, right? With the information we have from the job posting. Okay. And so there are some questions that sometimes interviewers ask, and we go like, gulp. How do I answer this? So, for example, here are some questions that can feel a little tricky. What other companies are you talking to? And here, it may be helpful to get a sense for what the interviewer may be thinking. Why are they asking this question? And they could be looking to see whether you are conducting a focused job search or whether you are all over the place, right? Because if you are conducting a focused job search, it is possible that you are interviewing with some of their competitors, right? In their same industry. By the same token, if you mention companies across many different industry verticals, that may raise some questions for them. Second question, what are your weaknesses? So there is a trick to answering this question. And here are some tips and some advice from the bottom of my heart to you. When you answer this question, I advise you to stay away from mentioning any personality traits of yours as a weakness. No, you don't need to go into an interview and talk about your procrastination, um, or stuff like that, how difficult it is to get out of bed in the morning. Definitely stay away from any mental health, or medical conditions you may have. um that's not the question to share anything like that. Instead, what I recommend that you do in answering this question is identify, for example, a skill set that you may not have a strength in it just yet. It may be something that you have been trying to learn, right? It may be something that you're currently learning about. And so that way you can tell the story of what you are doing to overcome that weakness. That is the strong way to answer that question. Okay. Why did you leave your last role? You always need an answer to this question that you can speak and feel confident speaking. Okay. In particular, if your last employer terminated your employment, you need to be able to speak about that, showing that you have healed from the experience, showing that you are confident, that you learned the lessons that there were to learn, right? And say something that makes sense. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do we see ourselves in 5 years? This is a question that is many times used in the traditional type of interview. And it can be a tough question. It's like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Who knows? But it's a good question to think about in advance. What are your reflections? What do you see yourself? Um, you can use this opportunity to talk about your career goals. What do you want to be in 5 years? What position would you like to have? What would you like to have learned in 5 years? And so, some quick reminders about job interview etiquette. Be on time. Don't be too early. Don't be there more than 15 minutes in advance. So in other words, I'm saying, the earliest that you get there is 15 minutes early. Okay, don't get there 30 minutes early. People are busy. They may feel like, they may feel stressed that you are there waiting. Okay, dress appropriately, quiet your phone, bring hard copies of your resume. Um, Remember your body language. That includes your handshake, your eye contact, your breathing, right? Remember to breathe. Notice here in this picture that I'm showing here on this slide, notice the very nice position in which she's sitting here, right? The other positions, try to avoid them, right? Remember to ask for the business card of the person and to send a thank you note. If you're not meeting in person, remember to ask for the person's email. So it's been great connecting and filming this for you. I mentioned this on on the participant workbook, and this is a video playlist that I invite you to check out with job search advice on my YouTube channel. I provide the link in the participant workbook. Thank you for making it through the end of this program, and congratulations. And I hope that this information will be of great value to you for a long time to come. Wishing you much success in your job search. Should you want to get in touch with me, this is my email address, and this is me on LinkedIn. Take care and see you soon.